nursing, I'm personally working with our finance team to make sure that going forward for each and every year, we build in a 10% contingency amount in our annual budget, just to be able to make sure that we have the opportunity to choose smaller vendors when their services and products are comparable. So we're doing a lot of work behind the scenes, one, identifying who we can spend with, making sure that we have the money to be able to do that, and really raise awareness that we are focusing on this initiative.
Adam, I really appreciate that. I will say this, it is great to be here whopping 7 months. So out of you and Hillary, I'm probably the youngest one at Emory. But again, and as I even said at one time that we know Hillary started, I think when she was 16 because she was working in research at that. So as you talked about that, I want to address a couple things that we go into this. One is I have a question related to some of the things that, because the thing is, the advantage is that you and Hillary work together on a couple things, because the School of Nursing uses scientific products and Hillary kind of does address that as well. Can you talk about how some of the things since our last conversation that that you see where Hillary has made some of the strategic sourcing initiatives, and I can let Hillary lead with that and then go into let Adam talk about it. Plus, Roz, I also want you to come in and tell us where you see from a universal standpoint, from some of the spin we're looking at scientific, how that works with women businesses as well. So Hillary, can you tell them a little bit about what you did during the COVID crisis for testing using minority vendors, and also currently some situations where you're looking to expand that?
Okay, thank you. You know, it's very definitely in COVID, things really, you know, it was just like you had a fruit basket you just turned over. Everything was different. And what we needed was, you know, in the beginning, you know, we were in search of a lot of PPE that we needed to supply the campus, and that was very difficult to get from any place. But you know, I ended up there were several local suppliers that were small businesses that we were able to draw from and get those things. You know, they didn't always have a large amount, but you know, but they seem to have, you know, we seem to have opportunities to, you know, get things, especially for our, you know, we have a Yerkes Primate Center, and for them, I did work with, you know, you had to have things like, you know, specialized Tyvek suits for the folks that are working with the primates and that sort of thing. And, you know, these are things that, you know, we just had to have. And so anyways, we were able to go locally and find quite a few of these things. But like I said, you know, even though you have, you know, with the larger suppliers, you know, they have all these agreements and who manufactures their things, and when they can't get the supplies, it was somehow we were able to really tap into some of these other smaller businesses that just seem to either have stock or you know, we're able to kind of bypass some of that other thing. So it was really helpful.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that real quick. So during COVID, we absolutely transitioned because it was so easy for us to go to we use Emory Express to order all of our scientific materials and supplies that we need for research and lab. And we were so used to doing that for almost decades at this standpoint, where we would go in, we'd click, well, all of these suppliers were gone. They were totally sold out. They didn't have any inventory left. And it really caused a challenge for us to be able to sit and wait for 6 months, and we just couldn't. So we looked to our local community, and we were able to work with a lot more local businesses in order to be able to supply our PPE, our research supplies, or our materials that we needed for our lab. And that was unique, and it caused a little bit more work, but it was absolutely imperative that we did that work to be able to, you know, stay in business essentially during COVID. And so the local community stepped up big time for us, opposed to working with these huge national suppliers that we'd always relied on.
Hey, Roz, can you elaborate that, especially from a small business standpoint, how being able to be agile and accommodate?
You know, I'm smiling because in listening to Adam and Hillary, you know, talk about how they reached out to the community to support them in such a, you know, critical time of need of getting supplies. And that is one thing, that we really need to redefine small business and understand the fact of how agile they are, how flexible they are. There's less red tape, in the system of making decisions. And of course, the big word was pivot last year, right? And how businesses pivot. I mean, we had a meat packing company, WBE, who literally converted part of her operation to a PPE, right? Of providing protection equipment, one for her employees, and she's pretty big for her employees, but more importantly, be able to sell it. You had premium promotional items suppliers who, if we go to conferences, we always got that hand sanitizer. We didn't know how important it was to hold that hand sanitizer simply because, right, of the lack of inventory that was in the market, due to the demand. And understanding that is the beauty of working with diverse suppliers. And understandably, they still got to meet your criteria, right? They still have to meet the guidelines, the quality, the pricing, those type things, but they are there. Then they are also employing in the community, so it becomes a opportunity for them to hire people as they grow, which gives back to the community. And then I'm going to say this creates a pipeline, if you think about it, for Emory. If we look at it from a 360 standpoint, that's the relationship that you're building when you're working with diverse suppliers. And it's a closer touch point, for you. So hopefully, that you're going to continue to see that those that were there for you will be there for you in the next normal, because that's where we are now, in the next normal, and that we continue to build the relationship with them and figure out how to scale them, more importantly, for them to grow. But that, is one of the things I think is the positive I'm going to use to a degree that came out of COVID. One of the things WeBank did was we literally put a list together for all of the corporates, and we ended up with over 400 women businesses on this list that provided PPE supplies to our corporate members, and they got that list every week.
That's awesome. The amazing thing about it, Roz, it goes back to the fact of when we discussed some of the things that Adam mentioned. One was kind of having that vendor pipeline that you just mentioned. And it goes back to originally some of the things I'm looking at Emory, which is policy, increased policy for diverse vendors and women-owned vendors certified. Also, vendor management system that incorporates more of the system so we can have a larger pipeline, because as we know, as School of Nursing and all the other locations within Emory are kind of autonomous, so they have their own budget. So we want to give them opportunity to have that flexibility to see those vendors as well. And again, going back to challenging the spend that we want to increase in those areas, because now we're able to get some data and information about that. So as we talk about this, Roz, I want to go back to a couple of things you mentioned, which was training, but also the fact is how schools like Emory as an institution, but also corporations that really can partner with you, what some of the things that you're looking for in those connections.
Well, when you say what are some of the things you're looking for in some of those connections, think about what you from a corporate side have access to that you would be able to share. I'm going to use the term a seat at the table, of looking at that. Even with your staff, when you're taking them through leadership training, I'm going to use that because believe it or not, that's a gap for businesses, especially small businesses and women-owned businesses, is truly to understand that. And how do you, if you have extra seats or extra sessions that can invite women businesses to be a part of that, and basically the leaders, to be a part of that. And that's something, hopefully we will build a relationship with Emory, regarding that, because those are the resources that our diverse businesses need, from corporations regarding that. understanding your procurement process, because people, different corporations utilize different processes in order to procure. You know, the question is your infrastructure centralized? Is your infrastructure decentralized? Who are the go-to people? You know, what are your requirements? You know, what does your decision matrix look like? Those are the things that our businesses can focus on with you all by sharing that kind of information with them. And again, being present, having your sourcing teams present. You heard me say earlier, relationship, about building the relationship, because unless you're the only supplier in the world that provides that product or service, you got competition. And so the question is, who does the sourcing manager trust? Because at the end of the day, that's what it boils down to. With all else being equal, who has their back in being able to deliver that product or service? Because Adam and Hillary, that's what they're looking for. Because, you know, there's pressure, as they say, in the line all the way down the supply chain. So it's not as if it just, you know, it stops at one particular link or area. It's pressure all the way down in the supply chain, from the customer all the way down to the raw goods. There's pressure.
Yeah, and that's great that you say that. So going back to this, to pivot a little bit too, as we use a word that Roz likes, Adam, when it comes to some of the things that Roz talked about, when it came to the opportunities and addressing those opportunities, for us, I know that we talk about budget is a key word that we will stay with, but being able to know when those budget times are or projects coming out, how can we keep that engaged? Because in some cases, we don't really know until the last minute. So how would that help for some of the vendors that might be out there?
Yeah. So, you know, as we're sitting here talking, School of Nursing is an anomaly here on campus. For those of you who don't know, our school is actually the highest ranked school on campus. We're the #2 school of nursing in the entire United States. And our leadership is actually made up of 12 individuals, 11 of whom are women. So it is female driven here. So we see our leaders represented in what our community looks like. You know, as the School of Nursing, we are 85% female in terms of our student body. And, you know, and Roz mentioned, you know, meeting somewhere in the middle in terms of working with our suppliers. For us, in order to be able to be successful and to be able to keep things moving along, it's all about accountability. It's not just those leaders that I mentioned. You know, I may have a say in a really large contract with a renovation project or a construction project, but think about our program assistants, think about our administrative assistants, the people who are really boots on the ground every day, working with these vendors, working with the suppliers. It's all about accountability for us. You know, we want to make sure that when you're placing an order, you don't just click the first link that pops up when you search for something in Google. You really want to take the time to intentionally research where you're spending your money. And that comes from raising awareness. So that's really where our focus is on that right now. We want to make sure that everyone knows that this is a school-wide initiative that we're really pushing forward. So that way people feel empowered to be able to choose, you know, the local option or the women-owned option or the minority-owned option, even if it is 10 to 15% more. And so that's the message that we're really pushing to be able to increase involvement and increase awareness here at the School of Nursing.
And one thing I'd ask you, Adam, you didn't speak about this,
yeah,
but your school is also very diverse from a
very diverse.
So yeah, what's the percentage? I think it's like 40%.
It's actually even higher than that. Yeah, we're over 50% in our student body. Our staff is actually over 60% diverse as well. So we're pretty strong in terms of those numbers and representing our local community here in Atlanta.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yep.
So Hillary, I'm going to go to you for a minute. Based off of your knowledge and awareness, you know, you work with so many different vendors. You've worked not just scientific, you worked outside of scientific as well. But can you give us a sort of a little bit of a roadmap for some of the vendors out there to make sure they're knowing they're doing the right things when approaching or coming to Emory? Because I know we've had some challenges in the past, and we want to make sure they're able to be not as much qualified, but have the correct opportunity that fits them to make them successful.
Right. So thanks. Yeah, it's what that is, one of the issues that, really that we have is knowing who you are and what you can do to help, support our research or our campus. And so, I found that, that things like, these meetings that we have and the matching with the Greater Women's Business Council, WeBank, GMSDC, these help us, some of these matching things help us find out who you are. We take notes, we put you into our database. We don't have a very sophisticated database right now, but these are the things that help us, know who you are. And then, we are very decentralized, as it was spoken about earlier. So, somebody has to, come to us and be able to say, hey, I've got this project, I need this. And then we can match somebody up. Now, I do have, one thing that for our folks that are on this call that do want to register with Emory, we do have a website that you can go and you can provide a capability statement, emails, and you can outline all your major areas that you could support this campus. So that's good. And, that email is supplier.diversity@emory.edu. So again, supplier.diversity@emory.edu. And that is the first step. Like I say, going ahead and having these matching sessions, the thing is, we do need a more sophisticated system, and we're working on that. I would say that, we are very thankful to have Randy Brown as our supplier diversity and inclusion manager with us. And I think he's been making some great, headway in this area. And so, hopefully, we're going through some growing pains, but hopefully we'll be there, soon. And the other thing that I want to mention to the group, if you are a supplier, I know one of the things that Randy always harps on is that we really need to have you certified by a third party, such as the Small Business Administration. I know that sometimes folks are self-certified, but this is really just an advantage, in my opinion, because if you're using that as a criteria, because you may be competing against somebody who says they're self-certified, but they may not really meet the requirements. So, I would say make sure that you have your certification in place, and that would be my advice as well.
That's great, because I can go into Roz with that. And Roz, let's talk about that, because I do push a lot on the certification pieces, because sometimes we use SAM as a system for looking for vendors for our subcontracting plans. But in some cases, they are self-certified, which means that they didn't go through SBA to get their designations, or from a SAM standpoint, it really doesn't focus on minority but it does focus on women-owned business. So can you elaborate on the advantages of that so people can understand that?
Yes, and that's one of the reasons we exist. The purpose of a WeBank, or I'm going to also mention NMSDC for the Minority Council, who certify minority businesses. The purpose is for us to vet those businesses to make sure they are who they say they are. And what those minimum requirements are, which is 51% owned, operated, and controlled. So it's not one of three. They have to meet all of that. And with WeBank, we're 100% site visit. It is not just a paper audit. It is also an interview audit to make sure, again, that that woman applicant does own the business, has the control and operating responsibilities of the business. And you mentioned SAM, so WeBank also certifies women-owned small businesses for the federal government. So we're one of 4 third-party certifiers that do that as well. And Congress actually changed the rule last year in the middle of COVID and all of this that's happening and going on, where self-certification for the women-owned small business, now they can no longer just self-certify. They will have to go through an application process, whether they go through any of the 4 third-party certifiers such as WeBank, or they apply online with SBA. So they're putting a little more stringent guidelines on verifying women businesses. Of course, you know, I'm somewhat jaded when it comes to WeBank, and we actually have the largest population of women-owned small businesses for the SBA of the third-party certifiers. So that is something to keep in mind and encourage, because women businesses, as long as they meet the criteria of the NAIC codes that are designated for WOSB, then keep in mind, not only do they certify for the federal government, which some corporations have subcontracting plans with, they also certify for the private sector, which is how WeBank was actually born. So keep, you know, those are the things that are important as far as getting certified. Aside from that, it is the networking, right? It's becoming a part of a community of women businesses in that sense, or minority businesses that are there to help you as leaders, you know, as lonely at the top. And so now you have an opportunity to network with other leaders, gain ideas, benchmark, you know, what works, what doesn't work. Enough mistakes have been made in the world. We don't need to create new ones. So it's, you know, that's the opportunity that you have, you know, in the certification process. And more importantly, I said, pass the newspaper test. When you have the CEOs of companies, or as it relates to Emory, the president, you know, of these universities, when they're standing there and saying, we do $100 million with women-owned businesses. Okay, that's a projection. All right, that's a, hopefully that will occur. Is we got to make sure they are who they say they are. You know, otherwise that's an embarrassment for our corporations, right? And that president. And again, remember I talked about that pressure in the system. Well, it comes all the way back to you, Randy, because saying, hey, wait a minute, you know, if it's not 100 million, what is the number? Because I'm now finding out this, you know, WBE really is not a WBE. Now, my disclaimer, doesn't mean we don't make mistakes, but believe me, we do a course correction as soon as possible, you know, regarding that, and we will decertify also. And sometimes it's for good reasons that we decertify. That business is growing and they decided to sell. It just wasn't a woman-owned business they sold to.
Yeah, Roz, I appreciate that. And again, as a person who realizes the importance of the certification, because I was going to ask that question, but you already addressed it. What's the value of doing it? In some cases, people think that you're supposed to give them sales, and in all actuality, is to validate you as that business that you say you are. So that being said, I know we've got a couple minutes before I do questions. I want to go ahead and try to wrap this up a little bit. So, Roz, you started off. I'm going to go back to you. How'd you get involved initially as women-owned businesses? And then also tell me 1 or 2 things you look to accomplish as we continue to go on with this relationship. And and just
involved.
FYI, the $100 million, I put that over to the side, so you can't mention that.
I appreciate
again.
that. We appreciate that. That's a great goal for Emory to have. You know, when you said, okay, almost $14 billion, I was doing the math in my head of saying, okay, how do we get to 100 million for women businesses? Because that opportunity is there.
But that was economic impact. Let's remember that. It's not spend, it's economic impact. There's a difference in spend. Okay.
Exactly. You know, one data point I'll share with you, our women businesses, you know, we have about 1,100 women businesses in our region. Their revenues are close to $8 billion in revenue. And they employ over 54,000 people between the 3 states. So there is that economic impact that is occurring. And of course, they want to continue, you know, to grow. But to answer your question, how I got involved, I actually have to go back to my mom. My mom actually was a woman-owned business. And this was back, you know, way, way back. I'm not going to, you know, tell the exact time period, but it was before NMSDC. It was before, of course, WeBank. And so I grew up in an entrepreneurial household. I grew up in a small business household because she and my father both own separate businesses. So I understood that. And when I had the opportunity, I worked for Delta and had the opportunity to be a part of the supplier diversity team. It was a day that I'll never forget of just meeting with UPS, where WeBank came and said, hey, we need to start a council here. And I asked my manager for some seed money, and the rest is history, of literally starting the organization. I decided to go ahead and step out and do it day to day because I was very passionate about growing women businesses, of seeing the challenge. I had procurement background, so I was on one side of the table already. And so now is a great opportunity for me to share some of the things that would help women businesses in order to expand their opportunities for growth. So that's, basically in what it is. I think women businesses need to raise their voices a little bit more because they are awesome. They provide quite a bit of resources to companies and organizations, such as Emory, as well as other diverse suppliers. It takes all of us in order to build the society that we say we want to build as a growing entity, and looking at that ecosystem and saying, where do I fit in? Because we all play a role and a part in that growth and development. And you use the word accountability, Adam, and that's what's key and important. That's at the top of the list, that you got to be accountable, for your actions. You have to be accountable, and of course there's the same, too much is given, much is required, right? And that in itself is how we look at this, of understanding how do we grow diverse suppliers, give them the opportunity to expand their communities and build those communities, that are going to be strong and viable and, more importantly, healthy, right? So, those are the things that I think. As far as one or two things that I'm looking to accomplish, actually is really just to augment our educational resources at GWBC. We are applying for some grants now that hopefully will allow us to do that, which will actually escalate the opportunities for our women businesses, not only to have education, but then to have the resources to operationally utilize what they've learned. And that's something that has been a gap for businesses. We train them, but then we don't give them the resources to be able to implement what they've learned. So that's one of the things I'm looking at. And also continuing building relationship with Emory, because I think you all can play a very, very valuable role in that, in this academia space of looking at and partnering with different universities such as yourself in order to help us do that.
I appreciate that, Roz. So I would almost want to pivot to Adam and Hillary, but we're going to try to get in some questions. So I might ask you guys to address some of these as we go through it. So I'm going to start off with the first question I got was asking about the program and knowing exactly how to get into the database. So Hillary addressed that. And Hillary, could you give that information one more time, please?
Sure, that's supplier.diversity@emory.edu.
Yep. And as she stated, send us your capability statements, 1 to 3 areas that you believe you would match up with what we're doing, so we can look at that. I know one of the challenges for small businesses, especially in this economy, are trying to do a lot more just to get a door in, get a foot in, but we will make sure we give you we'd like to match you up with the correct opportunity. So the next question I have is from Michelle. It says, we're certified by women-owned civil engineering firm. Is there one main point of contact for Emory facilities, or are there several that we should get to know? So one is, I'll say, go back to Hillary's comment of basically sending your information there. Right now, I am the point of contact I will say, please give me time to respond. But use that as a way of reaching out. And we're doing, as Adam mentioned, we're doing a lot of work on the campus. So as we continue to move forward, we'll definitely be looking for certified women-owned suppliers in those areas of facilities. As we talk about Emory, just again from the university side, facilities, which is our campus services, and also our campus life are the two largest areas that have the spend on campus right now. So,
yeah. And Randy, real quick, I was just going to say, I'd love to close out with this just on my part. We live in Atlanta. We are surrounded by an incredibly diverse population. We want to ensure that we're creating opportunities for minority women businesses to benefit from this important initiative. It's not just about equality, but equity as well.
Definitely.
I mean, shopping local and spending within our community shows that we are aware of the effects that we have in our own backyard. I mean, for us, understanding where we are, which is what I'm doing with you right now, in order to be able to create a benchmark, allows me to be able to incorporate like real data-driven metrics to be able to track our spend. I want to confidently be able to say that from this year to this year, I have increased my spend in women-owned businesses by X amount of dollars. And that's the work that we're doing right now with your team. And I really want to be able to make that point to everyone on this call.
And I appreciate that, Adam. I think that's basically felt as Emory, as Hillary's part of our procurement team, which is the centralized portion. That's one thing we're focused on, is increasing that. As my boss and our CPO, so Kevin Nash and Scott Schachter, both are basically geared towards that as well. As we go forward, I just want to go ahead and Hillary, feel free to come in if you need to. Talked about, this is from Gail. It says, we are a niche CRO or clinical trials, mobile nursing, logistics company for transportation and shipping. So it sounds like you have some of the areas we might be working with, maybe with us or with healthcare. Again, I'll go back to Hillary's comment. Make sure you put your information in that email to me, and it'll go to our supplier diversity section, and I'll be more than happy to go through it, and we'll make sure that we can try to connect you. So let's see. Next question is, okay, going through, still trying to go through, going through. It's a whole lot of things that I missed then. Okay, so, here's a good one. So our company's strategic initiatives, this is from Diana, strengths leaders and teams to build greater alignment. Okay, for cultures. Is there a key contact to make the, let me say this, anybody that's looking for contact for where to go to, we're going to stick to supplier.diversity@emory.edu. And again, make sure you include your capability statement. Make sure you also include one or two areas of influence. As a person who used to be in sales, you should already have prospected where you wanted to go before you send that email. And Roz will probably mention that as well, as we know the suppliers, as small businesses need to be aware of that as well. As we, so I'm going to go ahead and go ahead, Hillary, I was going to let you finish up.
And I was just going to, interrupt you for a moment. So, knowing, what you have, that could support our university, and going to that website and putting your capability statement, it helps us. Like recently we had a government contract that needed transcription services, and we were able to match them up with a woman-owned business that we had met at that I'd matched up with at the GMSDC meeting. And so, and our, just so everybody knows that our government subcontracts, most of those, I don't know, maybe all of them, have 33% of the spend has to be with a small business, and then 5% with women-owned. There's all different categories you have, but with this particular supplier that we had that information on, we were able to match them up, and so they're working on that subcontract for us, and and now that they're working with us, that probably will continue to do business for them.
And again, it opens up opportunities outside the subcontracting plan, where we do transcription services for other research outside of that.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up, Hillary, I'll ask you one more question, because you were there, and I just want to ask you this. You're very passionate about this, and I just think it's great to have you, especially considering the fact your tenure within the space. but what made you be so engaged about getting involved with women-owned business?
Well, I am a woman myself, and I've always considered, one of these days I will be retiring from Emory, and I've always thought about that's been my dream of being an entrepreneur, and so I would love to know that, that we have that support from Emory and from other large companies, and even Greg Fenves, our president, he's really had this initiative to increase our spend. So that's really big. And as Adam mentioned, our community is very diverse. So our suppliers should be as well. So it should really be matched, and it should reflect what our community is made up of. So, that's really important. And it's just, I do want to give any kind of opportunities I can. And to any kind of, whether it's, small, minority, or women-owned business, I do want to be able to get those opportunities when I can, and look for those.
Well, again, I appreciate the panel being on today. Thank you guys for the opportunity to be able to discuss Emory and also discuss our new relationship, Roz. I'm thankful for that. Again, you have the email address supplier.diversity@emory.edu. And we look forward to doing this again sometime, hopefully in the near future, Roz. At that point, hopefully I'll make you the moderator and I get to be on the panel. But I know most of the time I like to talk anyway. So thank you guys again, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.